The following program is suitable for general audience of any age. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Gen XYZ on Other Derana News Channel, and we're actually here at Barista in Muleriava, and if you want to check this place out because it has amazing food and amazing vibes, definitely come check this place out. But today we actually have quite a different topic in hand, and we have one of our guests here today, Senior Vice President Commercial of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Ms Punyamali Saparamadu. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Miss, I want to talk a bit about financial literacy and why it's extremely important that the youth have it, because right now if you look at the education system, it's not prioritized. A lot of kids go to school, finish school, and still don't know how to do their taxes because it's not a part of their curriculum. So what is the importance of being financially literate in current status quo as the youth?
Okay, so thank you, Selena and TV Derana, for having me here today. So when it comes to financial literacy, it's really not limited to, say, finance students to know. And I think if you look at our background, I'm sure, like, considering all the religious, backgrounds that we have, they anyway, from very basics, they sometimes teach some, how do you manage your financing and things like that from small age. So it's nothing to do with like finance related sometimes, but financial literacy is a very vast topic. But as per the central bank definition, financial literacy has 4 components. That is numeracy and compound interest, and the other thing being the inflation and risk diversification. So basically understanding risk and return. So if I take the first one, numeracy, I think a lot of the students have anyway, and the youth, considering that we are we have higher literacy rates compared to the rest of the Asian countries. But and also the compounding interest, again, I think people understand because we have this habit of savings, and we tend to place fixed deposits or savings. At least all of us must be having, savings accounts at the moment. So you understand this compounding and compounding interest a bit. But the latter two, that is inflation and risk and return, is something that they're not very sure. Now, if you take statistics wise, financial literacy rate as per the central bank is at 58%. But if I take the latter two, that is inflation and risk and return, inflation only 55% understands, and risk and return, again, far lower, that is only 33% understands. So that gives that, that difference or the edge when it comes to really managing your financial sources and the concepts like investing and returns, all depending on your understanding of the latter two most of the time. So say now, if you take country as at the moment, the inflation is about 2%. So what if you have an investment that generates lower than 2%, meaning your rest of the goods and services increase far at a higher rate than your income being generated by that investment? So that's a simple understanding about the inflation. So we talk about real returns. So real returns means you have to earn far ahead than the inflation so that you can you expand your financial capacity to access to more goods and services in the future. So when it comes to risk and return, it's about understanding funding options and alternative investments. So when it comes to investments, I think a lot of the youth are concentrated on, opening a bank account, having a savings or FD account, like I said before, and not really understanding much about the financial instruments. Maybe that is more limited to these finance students only knowing. So if you take Sri Lanka capital markets at a broad sense, it has this banking segment is obviously a far bigger segment. And also you have other instruments like government securities, and there are instruments like corporate debt, and of course the stock market, where you get to invest in companies like equities and all. So the understanding of that is a little lower, but of course now there's a lot of awareness programs are being conducted, and I would encourage the youth to really participate. I mean, they can easily utilize their social media time to, do something purposeful and to really understand these concepts.
Yes, taking a bit off of what you said, now there are awareness programs, but for any student who is not interested in pursuing a financial, career path, right, going to maybe investing in the stock market, but you need to have like how to get out of debt, how to stay out of debt, how to invest in the right things, because that is sort of a good knowledge to have across the board, whoever you are, right? Where can they get this information from?
So I think I would just rephrase your question now. Staying out of debt can itself be a misconception. It's like you should know when to borrow, at what rate to borrow. So you have to have a broader sense of economy and where the interest rates are at. And I think as a country, we have lived beyond our means. As a result, now we entered into this financial crisis. No? So over debt is bad, but the correct amount of balance between having a stable or reasonable income versus having a debt level is nothing bad about it, because as long as you utilize this debt for some long-term growth or purpose, that's okay. But to answer a question about how did they get this information, I think there are a lot of campaigns that the banks are conducting about why you should have a account, why you should invest in fixed deposits, and to create awareness on the other financial instruments like their debt products. There are personal loans, term loans. So as an individual, you should know when to sort of access to which funding type. And of course, if you have excess money, you then tend to invest. And then these government securities and all, it's there. I mean, it's there in public. You can access. It's a matter of Googling nowadays,
exactly,
right?
And it's at the reach of your
Yes,
fingertips.
and if you talk about the stock exchange, of course, there are enough and more awareness. And also we have an education arm called ADFM, where students can actually register and access to material. So say even if you're not a finance student, I think it's a very basic skill that you acquire the required knowledge for managing your own personal financing, as well as say if you're stepping into being an entrepreneur. It's imperative that you understand this funding side of it and what the funding options as an entity that you should access, and at what time, type of investor groups and things like that. So it's a very vast topic, but I think nowadays nobody can complain that they are not really aware about it, considering the penetration of social media and internet and everything.
And now that we've established the importance of having, financial literacy amongst the youth, and I want to know what are some common mistakes that the youth does. Now, you said you need to know the interest rates before you invest. You need to know what type of debt, there's good debt and bad debt as well, right? What are some common mistakes the youth makes when it comes to financial?
So I think youth, the biggest issue is that you over-rely on your credit cards. I mean, they get access to credit cards by the time, they are 18 and, over-reliance on credit card gives this misinterpretation of, owning the money that you really don't have. And then you tend to get involved in this spiral of, using it, it's cycling, and you only pay the minimum amount, and that actually tags the users for long-term, enhancing of their debt burden. So that is one mistake. They overspend, and they spend on status. I think they should focus on more spending on experience than status spending. And maybe it could be meals, or it could be over traveling, or there can be all kinds of overspending. So it's about living within your means. And the other thing that I can say is that not aware of what the optimal, investments that you have. I mean, opening a bank account and placing a fixed deposit is fine, but you should understand fixed deposit is only yielding maybe 8% or 9 to 10% return at the moment per annum. But if you really value the stock market behavior, just alluding to an alternative investment. I'm not saying the only alternative is stock market. There are other alternative investments like real estate you can look at. But then you have to understand the risk and returns. Stock market returns for the last 3 years have been really good. Like you take 2023, just as we were coming out of the debt crisis, the returns were like 25%. And the following year, that is 2024, nearly 50% return. And now 2025, nearly 43% return, So that's what it's important for you to understand what yields your risk and return and what's the best for you. And it's all about not putting all your money in one, investment. It's about having a balanced portfolio. So you're not putting all the money in stock market, or you're not buying a property using all your money, because your cash are held up for long term, because you're aiming at capital appreciation, right? You're not going to really get a return or money to your hand until you liquidate the real estate. Versus stock market, fairly liquid, and you can, so I would say the 3 biggest mistakes that they do is the overspending, overuse of credit cards, and literally not understanding the investment options that they have, and they lose the real returns.
And now that we've established, I think the mistakes that the youth makes, now we know why people go into debt. Like you said, they spend on demonstrative goods, goods that are, only like the need rises for it because of its status, like you said. Now, we can already establish the fact that most youngsters actually are in debt right now, or, they're looking for jobs, they're looking for money opportunities. How can the youth that is in debt get out of it? And the youth that want to not get into debt, how can they prevent it from happening? Like, other than not overspending, what are some other methods that they can avoid it or get out of it rather?
So, again, over debt is bad. Having some amount of debt is fine if you have invested in, say, capital goods, say if you have invested in a business with some long-term growth and purpose, and you have to always ask the question whether the money spent whether it translates to growth or translates to earning more money. So it's like you have to get the money work for you, not the other way around. So how to overcome is, again, you have to really maybe map your income streams down, and then you have to evaluate what your spending or the requirements are like, and maybe the debt, they are maybe mandatory, you have to pay your interest and you have to pay your capital. So it's about having maybe a simple Excel sheet to understand where you stand. So, and then to really look backwards, because in debt even there are ways of overcoming. You call it restructuring. Now, as a country, we restructure debt. So, the same thing goes with your personal financing. So, you can look at restructuring debt. Say, for example, if you have obtained a loan at, say, 20% interest rate, and now the interest rates are down to maybe 10-11%. So, why not considering restructuring that loan so that you have a low exposure? Immediately, that person gets a benefit on the cash flow. So, that's one thing I can think of. Of course, the other thing is you can even look at diversifying your income streams. Now, traditionally, we are all stuck to one job, one income stream. So why not you think through maybe even to be entrepreneur, to start your own business, or to have a sideline business like maybe freelancing, online tutoring. There are so many options at the moment. So why not you look at those also? And I think and you have to say you have cash already and having debt. Then you have to take a call thinking of the opportunity cost. Now say your cash only earns 10% and for your loans you pay 15%, there's a negative spread already. So might as well settle the loan. So those are the things that you have to really understand.
You have to basically be smart about the way you spend your money and how you're going to go about it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms Punyamali. And I want to dive further into, because you brought out the fact of entrepreneuring and why so many youth are, afraid to start, because they go into this whole section of safe jobs. right?
Yes.
And I want to sort of get into it as well, but we'll be right back after this short commercial break. We do have to, talk about where we are right now. We're actually at Barista in Mulleriava. So if you want to check this place out, definitely come check this place out. But until then, this is Gen XYZ on Other Derana News Channel. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Gen XYZ on Other Derana News Channel, and we are in conversation with Ms Punyamali Saparamadu, who is the Senior Vice President Commercial of the Colombo Stock Exchange, and we are here to talk about the financial literacy aspect of the youth and why it's lacking, what they should know before they maybe start a business, before they invest in something, all the need to know the basics of finance right here on Gen XYZ. And Ms Punyamali, where we left off, we were actually talking a bit about why the youth is actually so afraid to, start their own businesses. What are top maybe 3 things they should know before they start their own business? Maybe where to invest, who to invest in, how to discern that and not be deceived by scammers.
Selena, I think, so when it comes to entrepreneur, I think your partners matter. It could be your business partners or your suppliers and so on. And the second thing I would think is the employees, you and whoever works for your business. That has a big impact in terms of the business growth and the potential, and to realize the ultimate potential of that business. And the third thing I would say, or the most important thing I would say more than the technical side of the business, to really understand the funding side of the business. So maybe initially these entrepreneurs start off by putting their own personal money, and maybe you get friends and family to help you out. So that's how usually a business is started. And then at that time, no bank, no any other financial institution would look at you, because you're just starting and you're making losses naturally, maybe the initial years. And then as you grow a little bit more, maybe you can tap into, there are investor categories, we call them angel investors, who come in at the very early stage of business, understanding their potential, and maybe they invest money. So when it comes to money being invested in a business, it is 2 types. One is equity and one is debt. Equity means the cash, the actual cash that you put into the business, and the other thing being debt. Now, debt, I think we all know, because banks and financial institutions lend. So then again, say now you're making profits and you're in the growth phase, maybe you're opening a bit more to the other funding options. Like it could be bank funding. Say if you have accumulated some assets, the bank might want to lend against those assets. So we call it collateral. So bank will only lend you X by keeping some of your assets as collateral. And it can be collateralized or uncollateralized. But then when you're into your growth phase and you're maturing a little bit, that is the time where you can think of accessing public funding. So the public funding is beyond the bank funding. So then you're actually getting money from the public, is where actually the stock market come into play. So we call that process a listing. You're listing your business, and so that is the kind of trajectory that an entrepreneur might look at. So the initial, the 3 important things I would say: your partners, your employees, and your funding of your business, and funding the growth of your business.
Now, talking about knowing your partners and trusting your partners, you can often run into scammers and people who take advantage of you or take more from you than what they're giving back in return. How do maybe the youth, not only entrepreneurs, but people who want to survive just in general when it comes to finance, the financial aspect of life, how do they know to avoid these kinds of people?
Yes, so there are lots of camps, and the most common terminology is these pyramid schemes, where that's from a more personal investment point of view. But when it comes to businesses, it's about finding the right partner. Say you're finding a business partner who's willing to infuse money into your business. So he might want something in return. So that is where this understanding of the law is important. Consulting a proper lawyer is also important. As much as you understand your partner, you have to really safeguard yours and your business's interest at the end of the day. The scams around is, of course, with all these loosely drafted agreements. So a lot to do with legal gaps, as well as unknowingly you're investing in all these, unregulated space. Now there are lots of things like the cryptos to all kinds of other, instruments that the youth tend to invest, but they also have to understand those are unregulated markets. Now, you take the financial institutions, the banks, the non-bank financial institutions, they are in the regulated space. And also there is this informal market. And in Sinhala, we call it Poli Mudalalila. So that is entirely informal. And there, they will lend you money for a very high return or very high interest rate. Say, for example, a financial institution would lend you money, say, for 10% interest per annum. That is for the entire year, you will be charged only 10% of the capital. And these these informal segments, they can extend loans, say, it can be 20% monthly. So you're paying 1/5 of the amount you borrowed as interest monthly. So those are some of the mistakes that a lot of these entrepreneurs do, because when they're in need of cash or money, they tend to, extend help to all, or rather go to all these informal sources, or could be scams, and they're not really thinking through drafting agreements or, properly engaging partners, which can actually be detrimental to them in the long run.
And now since we know that, okay, look, these are telling signs of when people are trying to scam you, and how we can avoid them, right? We also have to talk a bit about taxes. Now, the youth, the jobs that are currently in the market right now, for example, every job demands that you have experience, right? But not the youth, it's very hard for them to say, oh, I have experience in this. So how do you sort of navigate through earning a little amount and also paying taxes? How do we maybe get educated a bit on it, the youth?
Yeah. So, but I will qualify myself, say I'm not a tax expert at the outset, but what I can tell you is, so you have to understand basically the law of the land. I mean, the moment you are above 18, you are expected to have some degree of understanding. So the law requires, say if you're above 18, you have to open a tax file. And to file, say if you're below a certain threshold, maybe you don't need to pay taxes, but you have to file returns. It can be nil returns. It's a blank return, but still you have to file the return. And the understanding comes with, no, not everyone has to pay taxes. There's a personal relief of 150,000 a month. So that is 1.8 million a year. So if you're below that threshold, you don't have to pay taxes. So the government has given up to 150,000 to earn without really having to pay taxes. And whatever you earn above, then you fall onto a scheme of, tax brackets where you have to pay accordingly. So understanding that is important. And the fact that you have to understand that you file returns, it's even more important. Otherwise, the tax authorities has the right to, come after you. Maybe it's after years that they will figure out that you have not filed, and they will want you to file old returns.
Now, talking about, not filing your returns on time, now that could be considered tax evasion, right? I feel like a lot of the youth, they don't know that maybe not filing it on time or filing the right details, that actually has severe consequences. I feel like the youth doesn't understand the severity of filing your taxes. Maybe explain a bit about what is considered tax evasion and how to, do it properly.
So tax evasion is actually, Selina, it's about not paying the due taxes. So not filing is against the law of the land. So that's an offense, more or less. And if the Inland Revenue picks it up, they might warrant you to file for all the years that you should have filed, so that they can demand. And so tax evasion is something that a lot of the organizations, and even in personal capacity, you do. Say, for example, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't record your revenue properly. You do half of your business on cash basis, the balance half is actually on invoiced, and you're being recorded. So the cash component really doesn't get recorded. So a lot of the business, the perennial problem is they maintain 2 sets of books. And actually this is where this listing element comes in handy, because the moment you are listed, you are fully transparent, and so the problem of all these other tax evasion problems goes away, and the companies are mandated to record the revenue, and they will want to record higher revenue because a lot of the public investors are looking at you. Tax evasion is actually, it can have in personal capacity or at a more company capacity, that you're not paying your due taxes. So I think it's what exactly I think even the government is trying to address at a broader level. They want to enhance the tax revenue. I think last year it was a phenomenal year that they have achieved over 2 trillion taxes. So
And talking a bit about inflation now, taking a step away from taxes now. Inflation was actually at all-time high, and we know that we've been going through an economic recession in the recent past in Sri Lanka. How do the youth navigate their their expenses through high inflation rates?
So usually, a lot of the institutions, they mark it up. They say the salaries are marked up against the inflation. That's why you get an increment year on year and things like that. But the level of inflation that we had in 2021 was unprecedented, 70% inflation. So that was coupled with the rupee being devaluated, rupee went above 300, and so now stabilized around 300, 310 levels. When it comes to now, so for the youth in terms of understanding inflation is, it's important because again, it's linked to the investments. So you have to generate adequate returns above inflation. Otherwise, you would only deplete your ability to access goods and services into the future. Say if the inflation is 20% and your income or the investment income, you're only generating 10%. That's what I alluded to earlier, like a negative carry. You're only earning 10% when the rest of the goods and services are increasing by, say, 20%. So say if something is valued 100 rupees today, by the end of the year, it will be the same good will be valued at 120. And your bank account will only generate maybe 110. So you can't buy that product. So that's what really inflation investment returns mean. So consciously, I think as a country, we've been into this, we are very much into this savings mode. And in the history, the banks really didn't generate as much returns ahead of inflation. Actually, now it's not the case. Now the inflation rates are 2%. When the bank say if you place FD, you can easily generate about 8 to 10%. So that's above the inflation, meaning you're actually enhancing your monetary, the wealth ahead of the goods and services, price movements.
Now, talking a bit about like you said, we have to have different streams of income, right? So one of those could be, these financial tools, like for example, if you have an FD, a fixed deposit account, and you get the interest monthly, that's also, it might not be great, but it's also somewhat of an assistance to your financial, situation.
Yes.
What are some other ways that maybe we can get money like that?
So I think, this youth is looking for making quick bucks at the end of the day. So then naturally they get caught to these scams, again, coming back to scams. So that's why the youth has to understand what are the regulated setups. So if somebody comes and say, oh, I'll give you 30%, you deposit 100,000 with me, you have to think twice, thrice, what is the general interest rates are like? Can someone actually give a return of 30% just by, say, investing, 100,000? So you have to know where your money you're investing into. So that's one thing. And so the other alternative investments, like, maybe it could be government securities. Government securities are fixed income. Say you invest 100 rupees today, you will get, say, 10%. They call it like coupon or the interest, and you will get your 100 rupees back maybe end of the tenor. So usually there's a tenor. It can vary from maybe 3 months to even 10 years. So you should know where you have to place your money against your needs. Say if you have a short-term need, you don't go and place it in a long-term deposit.
Like a fixed deposit.
So it has to be matched with your spending and the upcoming spending and your requirements, right? So that is one alternative. And same thing, even companies issue instruments called bonds. Same thing, again, fixed income, like you're placing in a deposit. And you can always look at, investing into that. But only thing is, some bonds, they require you to invest in a slightly higher amount. That is, again, it's a function of risk and returns,
And
so,
talking now
exactly.
a bit about these other financial tools we can invest in, maybe start saving, whatever. Now we were talking about FDs, bonds.
And then the other thing is the stock market, where sort of I'm representing.
Yes. And I want to actually get into investing in the stock market. How someone who wants to start getting into investing in the stock market, what they should know, how they should pick their brokers. Again, brokers can also be scam artists, so how to avoid those things. And I want to get into a bit about how we can survive as the youth in, what's the ideal budget for a youth surviving in Sri Lanka right now, which is a very important question, I think. But we have to unfortunately head into a short commercial break, and right now we're actually at Barista Muleriaba. If you're wondering, you can come check this place out. They have some awesome aesthetic here and amazing food and amazing vibe here as well. So definitely come check this place out. But until then, this is Gen XYZ on Other Derana News Channel. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Gen XYZ on Other Derana News Channel. We are in conversation with Ms Punyamali Saparamadu about financial literacy and its significance to the youth. And we're diving specifically into a very, very important question that I think most of the youth have right now, especially if you've just started earning and you're trying to figure out how to manage your finances, what to spend on, what not to spend on. Obviously, it differs based on your lifestyle, based on the family unit, based on a lot of other factors. But I want you to tell me, Ms Punyamali, about how what kind of action they need to take. What is the ideal budget and how should they make their budget, rather with the little amount of income that they get?
So I think how should they spend is all relative to your income and your lifestyle. But if I can draw a few examples, like say for example, if you're just starting off a job and you decide to say rent a small apartment or something in prime Colombo, versus you forgo your convenience and you decide to maybe rent a house little outskirts Colombo, can have a positive cash flow impact then and there. But of course you have to spend a little bit more on traveling too. Now traveling is also another thing which is very expensive. Now the tuk-tuks are expensive. So essentially public transport fare is cheap, but I think most of us, for convenience, we just jump into the tuk-tuk and we go around. And it's fairly expensive because of the fuel price escalations and things like that. So it's all to do with sometimes convenience versus your lifestyle versus what's the amount that you want to your bottom line, because ultimately you have to have some amount of savings. You have to build an emergency fund. No matter how small your funding income is, you should have some emergency fund in case of emergency. Now the medical is expensive. So pretty much everything is expensive because we are now a post crisis era where we had 70% inflation. So that means the prices have more than doubled, right now, most of the goods and services if you evaluate. And so sometimes it's about adjusting your lifestyle, or you do something to your top line, that is your income levels. Maybe you'll have to run 1 or 2 jobs. Maybe you should evaluate doing part-time. Maybe you should evaluate doing like freelancing to some, this is on a very personal opinion level, but that's what I can say.
And now for the youth that actually, I don't know, now as of recent, it's become a trend for the youth to be a part of the stock market and investing in the stock market. Sometimes not really informed about how it works, and then they fall into scams or they lose a lot of their money because they don't know how to navigate through investing in the stock market. Why should the youth feel a bit intimidated by the stock market? Because it's not just easy cash grab. And what can they do to learn about the stock market?
So I think I would disagree. Sometimes it is an easy cash grab if you know what to invest in, right? So now if you look at the ecosystem of capital markets or the stock markets, so it's ultimately governed by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, which is a government entity. So now the Colombo Stock Exchange is the licensee of the SEC and the operator of the exchange. So we are the operator of the exchange. And again, they are like stakeholders. And if someone wants to invest, they have to pick a broker firm. So broker firm, there are about 25 licensed brokers. So the scams, they get involved by really, going behind all kinds of other platforms which pops up. So that's why they have to be aware whether these platforms actually link to a broker system. Whether when I'm depositing money, whether it's actually reflect a trade in the stock market. Now, I think recently there was a scam that there has been some platform which has been, requesting deposits, and they have been stimulating trading also. But those trading doesn't reflect the actual market trading. That is just a platform. So those are the things that the youth should be very careful, or if whoever wanting to invest in, they have to be careful about. So the best thing, the best way to access is, if someone wanting to invest in the market, you have to access our CSE mobile app. And you can register yourself, you can pick a broker, and then you can decide on how much you want to invest. And then the broker that you select will onboard you. So it is a more regulated process. And even being the stock exchange and the SEC, we monitor the market dynamics. So there are separate surveillance teams monitoring. So that's why now I think the stock market, there had been all kinds of misconceptions about, manipulation and things like that, which is far lesser at the moment because of the strengthening of the surveillance mechanisms. Both
and
things, the front end being the exchange and the regulator being the SEC. And that involves a lot of investment in systems. And we are employing recently, we are actually in the process of deploying a new system. So that has AI capability to detect these manipulations and things like that. So now I think the youth should be really intimidated or afraid of really investing in the market, because it's pretty much, it's a very visible way of investing. And it's a credible way because your investments are backed by companies, You're buying companies' shares, or you're investing money into companies' debt instruments, And so as the exchange, we are expanding our portfolio also. There will be interesting products coming in along the way, and they will get to know.
And I want to talk now, obviously, investing in stock is one way of investing. There's also crypto. And
Yes.
Sri Lanka is adapting slowly, the youth especially, when it comes to crypto. A lot of people are getting into it. What is your opinion on crypto? Is it another credible way of investing? Or is it not as regulated as stock investing?
I would say the crypto market is not as regulated. Certainly, it's not regulated by the local authorities. So, and so that's one area that the exchange and the SEC both contemplating about introducing digital assets. So the crypto sometimes are not really backed by an asset. Versus there's another instrument called stable coins. They are backed by, they are actually reflective of an underlying asset. At least there's something to rely on. only thing is that you should be very careful and you should know what you're investing your money in. And you should read a bit about it or maybe seek professional help in that case. I mean, anybody can reach out to the stock exchange to really, if they want to understand, they can reach out and I mean, we have a mechanism that we actually conduct sessions and forums, or we will engage one-to-one even in making them understand as to how they should invest and what exactly they should avoid and what's the process. And now it's pretty much very seamless, I would say. So they really don't have to rely on this or the other informal mechanisms if they really want to invest and generate a return. Of course, it's at the discretion of the individual, but this is a far regulated market, and that is something they have to...
And it has a sense of security to it.
Security too, for sure, because the mandate of the SEC and the CSE is primarily investor protection. So there's very stringent enforcement and actions that has been taken in the past. And actually, if you go to the SEC website and you look at the enforcement, and that gives a whole heap of list of enforcement actions that the SEC has taken
So
in
very
prosecuting, individuals who had been involved in manipulations and things like that. So this is something the youth or anyone else who's interested in. Now, since we've spoken about this financial literacy, about how you diversify your investments, the importance of earning returns over inflation so that your real returns are secured, which actually reflect how or the enhancement of the wealth. Otherwise, you're just losing your money if you're not earning enough returns against the inflation. So those are the things that they should be conscious about in a very high level.
What are some myths that surround, financing? I feel like a lot of people now, for example, it could be due to misinformation or lack of education rather. Yeah. But what are some myths that maybe culturally it has developed over time that actually have no truth to it?
So the biggest thing is that, of course, we have to respect that we have a savings culture. But the youth should understand savings and having a bank deposit is only one channel of investments. And there are a whole heap of other investments, like it can be real estate, like I said, the corporate debt, government securities, stock market, and even beyond that. Maybe they will want to invest, they should look at investing in a business, so more entrepreneurship side. And so that is the biggest myth, you have to just save and just sit on it. That is the biggest myth. And the other myth is like, stock market is like this, it's like a gambling place. They don't want to, there's a bit of reluctance to come into. Purely because on the manipulation side, I think that I explained earlier, like how we have taken steps to mitigate that aspect. And the other myth is pretty much that this entrepreneurship, they're very scared of. And they think like they have to get a good education and then should step into like more, decent jobs. That's what even our parents are encouraging. I'm not sure about your parents, but my parents, of course, that's what they've been encouraging. You have to, get a good education and find a good job, and, pretty much that's it. But I think the youth should be more open to entrepreneurship. While they're young, they can take risks and they should be open out. And I think in terms of the entrepreneur ecosystem also, it's developing. Like I said, I think I explained on the funding side. So now there are investor groups looking at and wanting to invest. Say if you're in the IT, there's a lot of coordinated effort to, uplift startups and entrepreneurs. So I think, so those are the things that they should really evaluate.
Like we actually established in the previous segment as well, people are moving away from entrepreneurship and going into safe jobs.
Yeah.
One thing, because the payment might be higher sometimes, especially if you go into corporate sector, right? A lot of people, that's another myth. If you get a bank job, you get paid higher, but it's not the case. What are some maybe job roles that are actually up and coming right now that the youth can actively maybe look out for, because data science is actually a very up and coming field. What are some other fields?
So I would say the biggest hype is, or the disruption is with the IT or the AI. So there's a lot of jobs are emerging on the cybersecurity space. I don't know, I'm just stating with very limited knowledge I have, but I know as a fact, like cybersecurity, AI, data science. Those are one of the highest emerging areas when it comes to job creation. Other than that, I want to just touch upon a slightly different point about the highest risks that the global is facing at the moment. Again, revolving around cybersecurity, AI, can be disruptive as well as it can be dangerous too. We know about this deep faking, imitating people and the persons and things like that. And in addition to that, the highest risk is the climate risk. I think that is fairly evident with the past cyclone and the post cyclone impact. I think it cost about 3 to 6% of our GDP. So that's the biggest element. So now, and in relation to that, in Sri Lanka, the sustainable financing space is also emerging. It's about doing business sustainably. And for that, I think there's a skill gap in terms of professionals who understand the sustainability related concepts and the instruments and the frameworks. Because again, another thing that Stock Exchange has done over the last year is we have introduced a thing called sustainable bonds, green bonds, social bonds. So those funding is specifically targeted for specific purposes. Say a green bond may be for a renewable energy, setting up a power plant. So maybe a social bond for more social cause, maybe women entrepreneurship, women empowerment, women education, things like that. So that is another area that they should be conscious about, and that has potential in terms of job space.
So
because
it's
there's very limited
incentivizing,
capacity in that area, where now the companies are, I think, augmenting their resources on those areas. So
And
maybe even youth can really target when they are educating themselves also to acquire. And also maybe to touch upon slightly remote, but language skills, Now it's no longer like a singular or a single English driven. Maybe you have to acquire multiple language skills also. Maybe you know a little bit of maybe Hindi or Chinese, because as a country, we are also dependent on those foreign countries' assistance. So,
And with one phrase, Ms Punyamali, if you want to give a lesson to the youth or one piece of advice to the youth when it comes to financing, maybe managing their finances, one single thing, what would be?
it would be to spend consciously, not impulsively, and to understand your investments.
Thank you so much, Ms Punyamali, for being a part of the show with us today. And I think we actually learned a lot about, even I myself, being a part of the youth, I think I learned a lot about how to invest in the right things and how to identify scammers and people that deceive you when you are going into, things like entrepreneur, when you're trying to start your own business and things like that. And I'm sure you learned a lot too as our viewers. So if you want to send in your feedback, you can always do so at feedback.agencenglish@derana.lk or via WhatsApp at 076-805-7933. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, we're actually here at Barrister in Mulleriava. So if you want to come check this place out, definitely do so. But until then, we'll see you next week, same time, same place on Gen XYZ, Other Than a News channel.
Where it began, I can't begin to knowing, but then I know it's growing strong. Wasn't the spring, and spring became the summer. Who'd have believed you'd come along? Touching hands, reaching out, touching me, touching you.